Today's video is mainly a review on this guy right here. This is the Osee Lilmon 5, but we're also going to be comparing it to some of the other monitors I own, especially this guy right here, the Portkeys HD7H, and I also have the trusty old Shinobi 5. This is the Mark 1, not the Mark 2. All of these monitors are in a slightly different price bracket, and we're also going to be going over if it's actually worth spending the extra money on one over the other. So let's get into it. Just a quick disclaimer before we get into this video. Osee did send me this monitor to review. I don't have to send it back, so I do get to keep it, but all of the opinions I'm about to share are my own, and Osee doesn't get to see this video before it's posted. So let's get the price out of the way here. The Portkeys is the cheapest one on the table. This one is a whopping $99 US, and the Shinobi being the most expensive option. Again, this is the Mark 1. This one is $400 US. And the Osee that we're mainly going to be talking about today kind of slots right into the middle with $200 US, $189 to be exact. Now that we have a little bit more context, let's go over what the Osee here has to offer. So just looking at the monitor, I would say it's a pretty well-built monitor. I personally do enjoy like the squared off design. It's not super comfortable to hold, the corners kind of dig into your hands, but again, how often are you actually holding your monitor like this? It just sits on top of your camera, and I would say this guy looks pretty damn good. Also, speaking of the build quality, I would say it's about 90% of the build quality of the Shinobi. They're fairly close, and that's saying a lot for something that's half the price of the Shinobi, and it is significantly better than the Portkeys, which is again $99. So for an extra $89, you are getting significantly better build quality, which is nice to see. Now let's just go around the monitor super quickly and go over the I/O. Starting at the very top, we just have the vents for the passive cooling. There are no fans inside of this thing, so it's just the vents up top and at the bottom that help keep the monitor cool. On the right hand side, we have a quarter 20 mount and the power button, and those might look like RE locating pins, but they're actually not. They're for this bracket, and it has like these two pins on the top and bottom. Again, they're just too small to be locating pins, and they don't actually help the monitor stay in place if you're using a different mount, but they do help with the bracket that they send you. So if you use this guy, the pins are great. Otherwise, they don't really serve any other purpose. At the bottom, of course, we have our standard quarter 20 mount, again with the non-real locating pins, and the SD card slot on this side to load LUTs onto this guy. Again, more vents as well. So you can mount this monitor horizontally and vertically, which is nice. And on the other side, we have a headphone jack and a couple other ports there. Nothing crazy. The back of the monitor is actually the most interesting part because it has HDMI in and out, which even the Shinobi, which is twice the price, doesn't have. It just has an HDMI in. So that is very nice to see, and it also has a DC port right there. So if you don't want to use NPF batteries, you can just plug it directly with, a D-tap cable to a V-mount battery or what have you, or directly to mains power. Again, the Shinobi that's double the price does not have that feature. Again, you can buy a battery eliminator from Atomos, but again, that's just an extra expense, and it's nice that the Osee monitor just comes with that DC port right there. Just really handy. One thing I did notice about the battery compartment is that the button to release the battery is quite stiff. And it doesn't help that it's at the very top either, but it's very cheap plastic and it's very stiff, so it's kind of hard to take the battery out every time. So I wish they had spent a little bit more just in that button there. Again, that's the one part of the monitor you're going to interact with most often. And the button on the Shinobi is much nicer. It's in the middle of the mount, so whenever you mount a battery, and I can pretty easily just take it out with one hand. And this just feels a lot better than the button that's on the Osee. I also wish that Osee had gone with a switch design instead of a power button. I personally just never enjoy when monitors have buttons instead of switches, simply because I can just leave it on and I can just turn off my power from the V-mount battery, and that way if I have 5 different things connected to it, one button can turn on and off pretty much my entire rig. But with a button, you actually have to manually turn it on every time, and that can be a bit annoying. And if personally it doesn't matter to you, then it doesn't matter, but someone who likes to rig out their gear a lot, This is a bit of an annoyance, so I wish it was a switch. Turning the monitor on, the first thing you immediately notice that it's a touchscreen, which is great to see. Again, twice the price of the port keys, but you are getting a touchscreen here compared to the port keys, which is just buttons to navigate. So this is a much appreciated upgrade. And I also really like that you can change the brightness just by swiping up and down on the screen, just like that. That is a great feature to have, again, if you're going to be adjusting that quite a lot. It's just super handy. You don't have to worry about going into any menus, just swipe up and down and you can adjust your brightness. You can also do that with the volume on the other side if you're monitoring audio from this as well with the headphone jack there. And it also has pretty much all of the features you would expect, like waveforms, histograms, zebras, focus peaking, false color. Not only does it give you all those features, it also lets you customize all of them to your liking. So there's an insane amount of customizability here, which I personally really enjoy, but some people take that as a con, as to like the learning curve can be quite large with something like this. But personally, I just like to take the time, set everything up how I like it, and then it's just there for me to use. That's why I kind of like the Sony menu systems, even though they're kind of infamous for being bad. I like that you can customize pretty much any and everything, and the same goes here. It's a lot to take in, but once you kind of get into it, you can customize pretty much everything exactly how you want it. Speaking of the OS, it actually uses a page system to kind of go through everything, so you can set up different pages with, you know, what you want on each page, and you can kind of swipe through it that way. Which is a good thought, and overall it's worked well for companies like Small HD. That's what they use mainly. But I personally don't think that was the best choice here. Again, you don't have to interact with that at all if you don't care for it. You just do everything on that one screen and you never have to worry about the other pages. But if you are someone who's thinking about setting it up with all the pages, I personally just think there's a bit of a hiccup where it just kind of fades to black when you're swiping through different pages, and it kind of just breaks the flow of things, if you will. It works for Small HD so well because they're high-end monitors and the screens are amazing, and they're pretty much like using smartphone screens, and everything is just fluid and it works. For something like this, which is, you know, more oriented towards budget users, I feel like it's just a bit redundant and you're not going to end up using it because it's just clunky the way it's kind of set up. So if you want, you can have 8 different pages set up, but personally I would just stick to the one, and it's pretty easy to toggle on and off whatever you don't want. So I would personally just stick to that and go at it that way. One other thing that I was really impressed with this guy was the color accuracy. It was slightly warmer compared to the back of my LCD screen, but for the most part I would say you could definitely use this as a reference monitor. You can get pretty good white balance off of this guy as well. And it is much better than the Shinobi, which again, twice the price, but it is notorious for being bad in terms of color accuracy. So I would much rather have this guy over the Shinobi when it comes to that. Osee does sell a special cable which you can use to properly color calibrate this guy, but honestly, I don't think that's worth it at all. This is great right out of the box. So I've got the included little arm attached here now, and it does come with a cold shoe, so if you want to use it with a microphone, you totally can. And one other cool feature is that it also has auto flip. So if you are using it to view yourself, you can totally use that feature. And if you're using these smaller NPF batteries, it just has enough clearance to clear that as well. So you don't have to worry about it being on top of your camera and not being able to flip it. You can totally do it. Again, just use the smaller NPF batteries. Two main things that I don't like about this guy is the locating pins, like I mentioned. So it does swivel on itself. It doesn't lock into place. And the placement of the DC port. One, if you have a wire sticking out, it's going to be in your way. I wish it was also on this side, so all of your connectivity was just on one side. And the other thing is that since it's not actively cooled, it does get a little hot. Again, the entire chassis won't get too hot, but the one thing that does get particularly hot is a DC port. And it's kind of right there, and that's where I always adjust my monitors from. And that's a bit uncomfortable to hold sometimes. I definitely wish it was on the other side, but again, that's a very minor thing, and if you own this thing, I feel like you would just have the muscle memory to just do it a different way. I've personally just done this for like 10 years now. Now let's talk about value for a quick minute here. After using this Osee monitor for a little bit, I honestly find it kind of hard to recommend the Shinobi. Again, they're both 5-inch monitors, they're very similar in size. And this pretty much has everything that the Shinobi has. Mind you, it also has extra I/O on the back with the extra HDMI port, and honestly, the HDMI port's placed better. I prefer when it's on the back of the monitor, and it also has the DC port right there. So you have more power options, you have more connectivity options. It feels pretty much as good as the Shinobi, and it's half the price. So I would say if you're in the market for a monitor, ditch the Shinobi completely and just go with this Osee. And overall, even compared to the port keys here, again, the big selling point of the port keys is that it's a 7-inch monitor, but it does have some shortcomings, like it's not a touchscreen and it doesn't support LUTs. That was the big one which I went over in my review. I personally really want my monitors to support LUTs. But if you don't care for a 7-inch screen, I would say it's worth it to spend the extra 89 bucks. But if you have a camera that outputs LUTs, like I've recently bought FX3s and they have the option to just output LUTs over HDMI, then I would say the port keys, probably for me personally, I would still go with a 7-inch monitor over a 5-inch monitor. But again, I understand I'm in the minority here. Most people prefer a more compact rig. So I would say the Osee, really, they've just knocked it out of the park. This guy looks good, it feels good. The OS is not great, but it's not terrible. It's totally usable. You can customize it 100 different ways, which is fantastic to see. And I honestly don't have a lot of bad things to say about this guy. I would still give a few points to the port keys. Again, it's a very budget monitor, but 7-inch screens, in my opinion, are just superior than 5-inch screens. And I'm okay going through the extra hassle of carrying this guy around. But if you're in the market for a 5-inch monitor, I truly think that it's time to retire the Shinobi, the Mark I, and just pick up the Osee. Again, the Shinobi Mark II offers a totally different set of features. It's half the thickness and it has camera control, so that's a totally different ball game. But if you're looking at the Mark I and this guy, this is a clear choice here. You just go with the Osee and just forget about the Shinobi Mark I. Alright guys, that was it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to leave it a like, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys next time.